The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon as Ryder Kane dismounted his stallion, the creak of leather and jingle of spurs echoing through the dusty main street of Redemption Springs. The townsfolk scurried indoors at the sight of him, mothers pulling children close and men averting their eyes, all except the brave few who dared whisper his moniker when they thought he couldn't hear, Heartless Kane. It was 1876, 3 years since he'd ridden into this Arizona Territory town and bought the abandoned silver mine outside its limits. 3 years of building a reputation that kept people at arm's length precisely where he wanted them. The war had taught him that lesson well enough. Trust no one, need no one, and you'll never be betrayed. Ryder tied his horse outside the saloon, his tall frame casting a long shadow as he adjusted his black Stetson. At 32, his face was weathered from sun and hardship, a jagged scar running along his jawline. His eyes, storm gray and cold, surveyed the street with practiced vigilance. "Evening, Mr. Kane," said Bernard, the elderly bartender, as Ryder pushed through the bat-winged doors. The usual hush fell over the saloon, cards paused mid-deal, conversations suspended mid-sentence. "Whiskey," Ryder said, his voice low and graveled. He never said please, never said thank you. Words were currency, and he spent them sparingly. Bernard slid the glass across the polished wood, careful not to make eye contact. Ryder drank it in one swallow, feeling the familiar burn. He placed a coin on the counter and turned to leave when the doors swung open again. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dying light, a woman he'd never seen before. She wore a simple blue dress, dusty from travel, her chestnut hair pulled back, but with tendrils escaping around her face. What caught Ryder's attention, however, were her eyes, determined, unafraid. "I'm looking for Sheriff Mills," she announced to the room, her voice clear as a bell. Bernard cleared his throat. "Sheriff's making his rounds, miss. Won't be back till morning." The woman's shoulders dropped slightly. "I see. Then perhaps someone can direct me to a hotel." "Traveler's Inn, end of the street," Bernard offered. "Though I should warn you, Mississippi." "Nora Ellis," she supplied, offering a polite smile. "Miss Ellis, Traveler's Inn isn't exactly suited for a lady traveling alone." Nora Ellis straightened her spine. "I assure you, I am quite capable of managing." Ryder downed his second whiskey and moved toward the door. The woman didn't step aside, forcing him to stop directly before her. Up close, he could see flecks of gold in her brown eyes. She smelled of lavender and determination. "Excuse me," he said, the words unnaturally formal on his tongue. She studied him for a moment too long before stepping aside. "Of course." As Ryder passed, he heard one of the card players whisper, "Poor woman doesn't know she just crossed paths with the most heartless man in the territory." Outside, the air had cooled with nightfall. Ryder untied his horse, but paused when he heard the saloon doors swing open again. Nora Ellis emerged, her carpetbag clutched in one hand. "Mister?" she called after him. "Kane," he supplied reluctantly. "Mr. Kane. The bartender mentioned you own the silver mine outside town." Ryder nodded once, impatient. "I've come to Redemption Springs seeking employment as a teacher. I understand the town has children, but no school. Take it up with the town council." "I intend to. But I also hear you employ many men with families. Would you be opposed to their children receiving an education?" Ryder studied her. Most people in town avoided speaking to him directly unless absolutely necessary. "Do what you want with the town's children. My men's affairs are their own business." She smiled then, as if he'd said something kind. "Thank you, Mr. Kane. Good evening." Ryder watched her walk toward the hotel, her back straight despite the obvious weight of her bag. An inexplicable urge to offer assistance tugged at him, but he quashed it immediately. Redemption Springs would eat her alive within a week, her and her schoolteacher dreams. It wasn't his concern. Nothing was, beyond his mind and the solitude he'd carved out for himself. He mounted his horse and rode out of town, toward the small cabin he'd built in the shadow of the mountains, far from the mine and farther still from the prying eyes of townsfolk. There, at least, he could breathe without the weight of his reputation pressing down on him. But as he rode, Nora Ellis's determined eyes lingered in his mind. The dawn broke over Redemption Springs with the promise of scorching heat to come. Nora had spent a restless night at Traveler's Inn, which had proven exactly as unsuitable as Bernard had warned. The walls were thin, the mattress thinner, and the sounds from the adjacent rooms left little to the imagination. She dressed in her second-best dress, a sensible brown cotton with modest lace at the collar, and pinned her hair into a neat bun. Today, she would meet with the town council and present her case for establishing a school. She had references, a teaching certificate from Boston's finest institution, and 3 years of experience. Surely that would be enough to convince them. As she stepped onto the boardwalk, the town was already stirring. Men headed to work, shopkeepers opened their doors, and wagons rattled down the dusty main street. She spotted the town hall at the far end, a surprisingly grand building for such a modest settlement. "Miss Ellis." Nora turned to see Bernard hurrying toward her, his wispy white hair catching the morning breeze. "Good morning, Mr. Bernard." "Just Bernard, miss. I wanted to catch you before the council meeting. Word travels fast in small towns." "I see that," she said with a smile. "Listen, about the school. Town's been trying to get one started for years. Problem is funding, and—" He lowered his voice, convincing Kane to donate the land. "He owns most of the property surrounding town." "Mr. Kane? The gentleman from last night?" Bernard's eyebrows shot up. "Gentleman isn't a word most folks would use for Ryder Kane." "Why is that?" Bernard glanced around before answering. "Came here 3 years back, bought the old Anderson mine when everyone thought it was tapped out. Turns out it wasn't. He struck a new vein within months. Made him rich, but not friendly. Never contributes to town events. Keeps to himself. Cold as ice, that one. They call him Heartless Kane, and for good reason." "No man is truly heartless," Nora said, though she recalled the steely gray eyes that had seemed to look through her rather than at her. Bernard shrugged. "Maybe so, but if Kane has a heart, nobody in Redemption Springs has seen evidence of it. Thank you for the information, Bernard. I should go. I don't want to be late." The town council consisted of 5 men. Mayor Thompson, a jovial but shrewd businessman, Dr. Harrison, whose kind eyes belied a sharp intellect, Mr. Peterson, the banker, Mr. Williams, who owned the general store, and surprisingly, Sheriff Mills, who had apparently returned from his rounds. Nora presented her case confidently, laying out her qualifications and vision for a school that would serve the growing community. "Your credentials are impressive, Miss Ellis," Mayor Thompson said, "and we've been hoping to establish a school. But as you can see, our town is still developing. We lack both funds and suitable land." "If I may," Sheriff Mills interjected, "there's that old church building on the edge of town. Been abandoned since the congregation built the new one. Belongs to Kane now," Mr. Peterson said dismissively. "Bought it last year when we couldn't pay the property taxes." Nora's heart sank. Again, this mysterious Mr. Kane seemed to be at the center of the town's challenges. "Has anyone asked him if he'd be willing to sell it or donate it for a school?" she asked. The men exchanged glances that spoke volumes. "Miss Ellis," Dr. Harrison said gently, "Ryder Kane doesn't participate in community matters. He's made that quite clear." "I see," Nora said, though she didn't, not really. "Well, perhaps he simply hasn't been presented with the right opportunity. I'd like to speak with him myself." Mayor Thompson's eyebrows shot up. "That's not advisable, Miss Ellis. Kane is not known for his patience or hospitality. Nevertheless, I'd like to try. The children of this town deserve an education." After the meeting, Nora found herself walking toward the general store. If she was going to approach the infamous Mr. Kane, she would need information and supplies for the journey to his mine. Mr. Williams greeted her warmly. "Miss Ellis, what can I help you with today? I need directions to the Kane silver mine and perhaps some provisions for the journey." Williams's friendly demeanor faltered. "You're going out to Kane's mine? Alone?" "Yes. The council mentioned he owns the old church building, which would be perfect for a school. I intend to discuss the possibility with him." "Miss Ellis," Williams said, lowering his voice, "folks don't just ride out to Kane's mine for a chat. His foreman, Jackson, handles most business in town. Kane himself." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Mr. Williams, I've traveled across the country alone to teach in this town. I assure you, I can handle one conversation with a businessman, regardless of his reputation." Williams sighed but proceeded to gather supplies and draw her a rough map. "It's about 5 miles northeast of town. Follow the creek until you see the mining operation. Can't miss it. But Miss Ellis. He looked at her earnestly. If Kane turns you away, don't push. Man's got a temper that makes a rattlesnake seem friendly. Nora thanked him, paid for her supplies, and headed to the livery stable to rent a horse. An hour later, she was riding out of Redemption Springs, the sun high overhead and determination burning in her chest. The desert landscape was beautiful in its stark way red rocks and sagebrush, hawks circling overhead, the distant purple shadows of mountains. Despite the heat and dust, Nora felt a sense of freedom she'd never experienced in Boston's crowded streets. She followed Williams's directions, keeping the creek in sight. After about an hour's ride, she heard it before she saw it, the rhythmic pounding of machinery, the shouts of men. Cresting a small ridge, she looked down on the Kane silver mine. It was larger than she'd expected, a sprawling operation with numerous buildings, a water tower, and what looked like dozens of men moving about like ants. The main shaft entrance was visible, along with rail carts for moving ore. It was a testament to industry and ambition, impressive in its efficiency. Nora guided her horse down the slope toward the main office building. Several men stopped to stare as she approached. A woman alone was clearly an unusual sight at the mine. She dismounted outside the office, tying her horse to a hitching post. "Can I help you, madam?" A burly man with a thick mustache approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "Yes, I'm looking for Mr. Kane. Is he available?" The man's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Kane? He ain't one for visitors. I'm Jackson, the foreman. Whatever business you got, you can take it up with me." "I appreciate that, Mr. Jackson, but this matter requires Mr. Kane specifically. I'm Nora Ellis, the new teacher in Redemption Springs." Jackson snorted. "Ain't no school in Redemption Springs, madam." "Not yet," Nora said with a smile. "That's precisely what I wish to discuss with Mr. Kane." Jackson studied her for a moment, then shook his head. "Your funeral? He's up at his office, that building there with the porch. But don't say I didn't warn you." Nora thanked him and walked toward the indicated building, ignoring the curious stares of miners. She smoothed her skirts, adjusted her hat, and took a deep breath before climbing the steps and knocking firmly on the door. "Enter," came a gruff voice from within. She pushed open the door to find Ryder Kane seated behind a large desk, ledgers spread before him. He looked up, and for a brief moment, surprise flickered across his face before his features hardened again. "Miss Ellis," he said, his voice flat. "You're a long way from town." "Mr. Kane," she acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you for seeing me. Didn't have much choice, did I? You're already here." He set down his pen. "What do you want?" Direct and unpleasant. Exactly as she'd been warned. Nora straightened her shoulders. "I've spoken with the town council about establishing a school in Redemption Springs. They inform me that you own the old church building, which would be ideal for this purpose. And I would like to discuss the possibility of acquiring it for the school." Kane leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes appraising her coolly. "The old church building. You want me to just give it to you?" "Not to me, Mr. Kane. To the children of this community. Many of whom, I understand, are the children of your employees." Something flickered in his eyes, annoyance, perhaps, or possibly interest. "My men are paid well enough to provide for their families as they see fit. Education isn't merely a luxury, Mr. Kane. It's essential for the future of these children and this town." He stood abruptly, towering over her. "This town existed before you arrived, Miss Ellis, and will continue to do so whether or not its children can recite Shakespeare." Nora refused to be intimidated. "Literacy and arithmetic aren't frivolous pursuits, Mr. Kane. They're tools these children will need to build better lives. And what exactly do you expect from me? Ideally, I'd like you to donate the building for use as a school. If that's not possible, perhaps we could discuss a reasonable purchase price or rental arrangement." Kane moved to the window, looking out over his mining operation. "Why this building specifically? There's plenty of land around town. The old church already has the basic structure needed for a schoolhouse. It would require minimal renovation, saving time and resources. Additionally, its location is accessible to both town children and those from outlying farms." He was silent for a long moment, his back to her. Finally, he turned. $300. Nora blinked. "Pardon, the purchase price. $300 for the old church building, and the acre of land it sits on. It was far more than the town council had budgeted, but less than she had feared he might demand. That's quite a sum, Mr. Kane. It's the price. Take it or leave it. Nora considered her options. The council had authorized her to negotiate up to $200. Would you consider $200 as a down payment, with the balance to be paid over time? Kane's expression didn't change. $300, Miss Ellis. Cash. I'm not a bank. She took a deep breath. Very well. I'll need to discuss this with the council. May I have until the end of the week to provide an answer? He gave a curt nod. Friday. Bring the money or forget the deal. Thank you, Mr. Kane. I appreciate your consideration. He made a dismissive gesture toward the door. Jackson will see you back to town. That won't be necessary. I found my way here. I can find my way back. For just a moment, something that might have been respect flickered in his eyes. Suit yourself. Nora turned to leave, but paused at the door. Mr. Kane, despite what people say about you, I believe you understand the value of education. Thank you for that, at least. Before he could respond, she slipped out the door, closing it firmly behind her. The ride back to town gave Nora time to think. $300 was a steep price, but not unreasonable for a building and land. The challenge would be convincing the council to increase their budget or finding alternative sources of funding. The sun was beginning its descent when she spotted something unusual by the creek, a fluttering movement in the tall grass. Curious, she guided her horse closer. There, partially hidden in the grass, was a small bird, a desert sparrow with one wing bent at an unnatural angle. It fluttered helplessly as she approached, its tiny body trembling with fear. Nora dismounted carefully. It's all right, little one, she murmured, removing her handkerchief from her pocket. Gently, she wrapped the bird, careful not to further injure its wing. The creature calmed somewhat in the darkness of her makeshift bandage. What to do now? She couldn't leave the injured bird, but neither did she have the knowledge to properly treat it. Perhaps Dr. Harrison in town could help, or would at least know of someone who could. She was about to remount her horse when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her pause. Looking up, she saw a rider approaching from the direction of the mine, the unmistakable silhouette of Ryder Kane on his black stallion. He reined in sharply when he spotted her. Miss Ellis, problem with your horse? No, Mr. Kane. I found an injured bird. She held up her handkerchief-wrapped bundle. A sparrow with a broken wing. Kane's brow furrowed. You stopped for a bird? It's injured and frightened. I couldn't just leave it to die. He dismounted in one fluid motion, approaching cautiously. Let me see. Surprised, Nora carefully opened the handkerchief to reveal the trembling sparrow. Its tiny black eye looked up at them, its chest rising and falling rapidly with each breath. Kane's expression changed subtly as he looked at the injured creature. His features softened almost imperceptibly. Wings definitely broken, he said, his voice lower, gentler than she'd heard before. But clean. Might heal if set properly. Do you know how to do that? He hesitated, then nodded. My mother. She used to tend to injured animals. Taught me a few things. He reached toward the bird, then paused. May I? Even more surprised by this request for permission, Nora carefully transferred the bundled bird to his large, calloused hands. His touch was unexpectedly delicate as he examined the wing. It needs to be splinted. Tiny thing like this. He trailed off, looking around. His eyes settled on a nearby cottonwood. Wait here. Kane strode to the tree and broke off a small, straight twig. From his pocket, he produced a pocket knife and carefully whittled the twig into two thin splints. Returning to Nora, he knelt beside her. Hold it steady, he instructed, his voice still maintaining that unexpected gentleness. Nora complied, watching in amazement as this supposedly heartless man deftly manipulated the tiny bone back into alignment. The bird chirped pitifully, and Kane murmured to it so softly Nora couldn't make out the words. Using threads from Nora's handkerchief, he secured the splints to the wing with surgeon-like precision. His brow furrowed in concentration, a lock of dark hair falling across his forehead as he worked. There, he said finally. It's not perfect, but it should heal if the bird stays calm and protected for a few weeks. As he spoke, he continued to cradle the bird, his thumb gently stroking its tiny head. The sparrow had calmed considerably, its breathing more regular now. And then Nora saw something that stole her breath away. A single tear tracked down Ryder Kane's weather-roughened cheek as he looked at the fragile creature in his hands. He blinked rapidly, as if suddenly remembering her presence, and quickly wiped his face with his sleeve. But it was too late. She had seen it. This man the town called Heartless had shed a tear over an injured sparrow. "Mr. Kane," she began, not quite knowing what to say. He cleared his throat, his expression hardening again. "Bird will need a safe place to recover. Box with soft cloth, water, seeds." He carefully placed the sparrow back in her hands. "Keep it warm." "Thank you," Nora said softly. "That was incredibly kind." Kane's jaw tightened. "It's nothing. Just a bird." But they both knew it wasn't nothing. It was a moment of unveiled humanity, a glimpse behind the carefully constructed facade of Heartless Kane. He mounted his horse again, adjusting his hat to shadow his face. "Town's just over that ridge. You'll make it before dark if you hurry." Without waiting for a response, he turned his horse and rode back toward the mine, leaving Nora standing by the creek with a mended sparrow and a profoundly altered perception of Ryder Kane. The next morning, Nora awoke to the soft chirping of her new charge. The sparrow was resting in a small wooden box Bernard had provided, lined with soft cotton, and placed near the window of her rented room. "Good morning, little one," she said, peering into the box. The bird looked better already, more alert and less frightened. She carefully dropped a few seeds and placed a small dish of water within reach. As she dressed for the day, her mind returned repeatedly to the scene by the creek. Ryder Kane's unexpected gentleness, his skilled hands mending the tiny wing, and most remarkably, that single tear. What pain or tenderness lay buried beneath his harsh exterior? The memory of it distracted her through breakfast and accompanied her to the town council meeting, where she presented Kane's offer for the church building. $300? Mayor Thompson exclaimed. "That's robbery." "It's actually quite reasonable for a building an acre of land," Nora countered. "The challenge is finding the additional funds." Dr. Harrison stroked his beard thoughtfully. "We could organize a fundraising event. Perhaps a town social or auction." "Good idea," Sheriff Mills agreed. "Folks around here are generous when it comes to their children." "I could contribute $50 from my personal savings," Nora offered. The council members looked at her in surprise. "That's very generous, Miss Ellis," Mayor Thompson said. "But are you certain? Teaching positions don't exactly pay a fortune." "I'm certain," she said firmly. "Education is my calling, and I'm committed to establishing this school." They spent the next hour planning a town social to raise the remaining funds. It would be held in 3 days' time, giving them enough opportunity to collect donations before Kane's Friday deadline. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Harrison approached Nora. "Bernard mentioned you were caring for an injured bird. How is the little patient?" "Much improved, thank you. Mr. Kane actually helped set its wing yesterday." The doctor's eyebrows shot up. "Ryder Kane? Are we talking about the same man?" Nora nodded. "He was surprisingly knowledgeable and gentle." "Well, I'll be," Dr. Harrison mused. "Man's full of surprises, it seems. If you need any advice on caring for your feathered friend, let me know." "Thank you, doctor. There is one question: how long before the wing heals?" "For a small bird? 2 to 3 weeks if the break was clean. Keep it confined but comfortable. Birds heal remarkably well if given the chance." After leaving the town hall, Nora decided to visit the old church building to assess what renovations would be needed. The structure stood on the outskirts of town, weathered but solid. The white paint had long since peeled away, and several windows were broken, but the foundation appeared sound. She pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight streaming through the windows. The interior was a single large room with high ceilings perfect for a schoolhouse. Pews had been removed years ago, leaving an empty space ready to be filled with desks and learning. Nora walked slowly through the room, envisioning it transformed a blackboard at the front, rows of desks, perhaps bookshelves along the walls. It would need cleaning, repairs, and furnishings, but the potential was undeniable. "Miss Ellis." She spun around to find Ryder Kane standing in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the bright exterior. "Mr. Kane, I didn't expect to see you." He stepped inside, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. "Came to check the property. Jackson mentioned you were seen heading this way. I wanted to see what we'd be purchasing," she explained. "It's perfect for a school, spacious, well-built." Kane ran a hand along a weathered wooden beam. Needs work. Yes, but it's structurally sound. Nothing a bit of effort won't fix. He nodded absently, his eyes scanning the room. How's the bird? The question caught her off guard. Much better, thank you. Your splint is holding well. Something like satisfaction flickered across his face before disappearing behind his usual mask of indifference. Good. Dr. Harrison says it will take a few weeks to heal completely. I've named him Chance. Kane raised an eyebrow. Chance? Yes, as in second chance. Thanks to you, he has won. He looked away, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Council agree to my price? We're organizing a town social to raise the remaining funds. I'm confident we'll have the full amount by Friday. Kane walked to one of the broken windows, looking out at the desert beyond. Town social, he repeated, as if testing the words. Yes, tomorrow evening at the town hall. There will be food, music, perhaps some auctions of donated items. She hesitated, then added, You would be welcome to attend, Mr. Kane. He turned, surprise evident in his expression. People don't usually invite me to social gatherings, Miss Ellis. Perhaps they should. You're as much a part of this community as anyone. He gave a harsh laugh. I doubt most would agree with that assessment. Well, I'm inviting you. The decision to attend is yours, of course. Kane studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes unreadable. You're an unusual woman, Miss Ellis. I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Kane. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Take it however you like. He moved toward the door, then paused. $250. Pardon, the price for the building. $250. Nora stared at him, momentarily speechless. But you said, I'm revising my offer. His tone brooked no argument. $250. Final price. Before she could respond, he strode out the door, leaving her alone in the dusty church once more. Nora returned to town with her mind whirling. Wyatt Kane reduced his price. Was it possible her glimpse of his humanity by the creek hadn't been an anomaly, but a revelation of his true nature? The next day passed in a flurry of preparation for the town social. Women brought food, men arranged tables and chairs, and children helped decorate the town hall with wildflowers and colorful ribbons. The excitement was palpable not just for the fundraiser, but for the social event itself. In a frontier town like Redemption Springs, such gatherings were rare opportunities for community and celebration. Nora spent the morning checking on Chance, who continued to improve, and the afternoon helping with preparations. She wore her best dress for the evening, a forest green with modest lace trim that complemented her chestnut hair. As twilight fell, lanterns were lit around the town hall, casting a warm glow over the gathering crowd. A trio of musicians set up in one corner with a fiddle, guitar, and banjo. The tables groaned under the weight of home-cooked dishes, fried chicken, cornbread, pies of every description, and jars of preserves for the auction. Miss Ellis, called Sarah Williams, the storekeeper's wife. Everything looks wonderful. The whole town has turned out. Indeed, it seemed that nearly everyone in Redemption Springs had come to support the school. Families with children, elderly couples, young unmarried men and women all mingling and chatting excitedly. Have you seen Mr. Kane? Nora found herself asking, scanning the crowd. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Kane? He doesn't come to town events, dear. Never has. Nora tried to hide her disappointment. Of course. I just thought. Well, since the fundraiser is for property he's selling. The evening progressed with music, dancing, and much laughter. Mayor Thompson conducted the auction with entertaining flair, extracting generous bids for donated items. Bernard kept track of the money collected, his face growing increasingly pleased as the total mounted. Nora danced with several partners, Dr. Harrison, who proved surprisingly spry for his age, Sheriff Mills, who apologized repeatedly for stepping on her toes, and various other townsmen who seemed eager to impress the new schoolteacher. During a brief respite, she stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The night was cool and clear, stars speckling the vast desert sky. Leaning against the railing of the town hall's small porch, she gazed up at the constellations. Fine night, said a low voice behind her. Nora turned, startled, to find Ryder Kane standing in the shadows. He wasn't dressed for a social still in his usual dark shirt, vest, and riding pants, but he had made an effort to clean up. His dark hair was combed, his face freshly shaved. Mr. Kane, she said, unable to keep the pleasure from her voice. You came. He shifted uncomfortably. Just passing by. Of course, she said, playing along. Quite a coincidence. He moved to stand beside her, his eyes on the night sky rather than the festivities inside. Successful evening? Very. We've raised nearly $200 already. With my contribution and what the council had saved, we should have your price by Friday. Kane nodded, still not looking at her. Good. They stood in silence for a moment, the music and laughter from inside creating a strange counterpoint to the quiet tension between them. How's your bird? He finally asked. Chance is doing well. Your splint is holding perfectly. Another nod. Good, he repeated. Would you like to see him sometime? Nora asked impulsively. I'm staying at the Travelers' Inn until more permanent arrangements can be made. Now he did look at her, surprise evident in his expression. Visit you at your lodgings? That would hardly be appropriate, Miss Ellis. To check on a patient? I think social conventions could bend that far, Mr. Kane. She smiled. Besides, my reputation is hardly at risk from a man visiting to see a bird. The music inside changed to a slower tune, a waltz that filtered through the open windows. Do you dance, Mr. Kane? Nora asked before she could reconsider. He stiffened. Not in a very long time. Would you consider making an exception tonight? For the school fundraiser, of course. Kane looked at her as if she'd suggested they rob a bank together. People would talk. People always talk, Mr. Kane. I found it's best to give them something interesting to discuss. To her surprise, a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You truly are unlike anyone I've met in this town, Nora Ellis. The use of her full name sent an unexpected warmth through her. Is that a yes? For a moment, she thought he might refuse. Then, with deliberate slowness, he extended his hand. One dance. Nora placed her hand in his, noting the contrast between his calloused palm and her smoother one. One dance, she agreed. They entered the town hall together, and a hush fell over the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Musicians nearly missed notes, and heads turned as Ryder Kane led Nora to the small dance floor. He placed one hand at her waist, maintaining a proper distance between them as they began to move to the music. Despite his claim of being out of practice, he danced well, confident and graceful for such a large man. Everyone is staring, he muttered, his eyes fixed somewhere above her head. Let them, Nora replied softly. Perhaps they'll see what I'm beginning to see. His eyes dropped to meet hers. And what is that? A man far more complex than his reputation suggests. Kane's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. You know nothing about me, Miss Ellis. I know you helped an injured bird when no one was watching. I know you reduced the price of the church building without being asked. And I know you came here tonight despite believing you wouldn't be welcome. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. Don't mistake momentary civility for something more. Is it civility that brings tears to a man's eyes when he helps a wounded creature? Kane missed a step, recovering quickly, but not before Nora felt the falter in his composure. You shouldn't have seen that. But I did. And it told me more about you than all the town gossip combined. The music was drawing to a close, their time together nearly over. Nora took a chance. The bird isn't the only one who deserves a second chance, Mr. Kane. Before he could respond, the waltz ended. Kane released her immediately, stepping back with a formal nod. The spell was broken, the moment of connection severed. Thank you for the dance, Miss Ellis, he said stiffly. Then, turning on his heel, he strode toward the door, the crowd parting before him like water. Nora watched him go, aware of the curious eyes now fixed on her. She lifted her chin and smiled, turning to Bernard, who stood nearby with wide eyes. Bernard, how much more do we need to reach our goal? The old bartender blinked, refocusing on his ledger. Let me see. With your contribution, we're still about $30 short. Nora nodded, determined not to let Kane's abrupt departure dampen the evening's success. Then let's see if we can raise it before the night is through. She threw herself back into the festivities, but a part of her mind remained with the man who had danced with her and then disappeared into the night, a man who, despite his best efforts to hide it, had revealed he possessed a heart after all. Friday dawned bright and clear, a perfect Arizona morning. Nora had spent the previous day preparing for her meeting with Kane, gathering the funds from the town social and adding her own contribution. They had exceeded their goal, raising $270 total, 20 more than Kane's revised price. She checked on Chance before leaving, pleased to see the splint still holding well and the bird's increased appetite. "I'll be back soon," she told him, refreshing his water and seed. The walk to Kane's office in town was short, but gave her time to organize her thoughts. Despite their dance and the glimpses of humanity she'd witnessed, Kane remained largely a mystery. She couldn't predict how he would react today. His office was a small building near the bank, rarely used according to townsfolk. Kane conducted most of his business from the mine, coming into town only when necessary. To her surprise, he was waiting for her, seated behind a simple desk with ledgers open before him. He looked up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Miss Ellis. Right on time." "Mr. Kane." She nodded, closing the door behind her. "I have the money for the church building." She placed a small cloth bag on his desk. $270, as agreed. The extra 20 is for immediate repairs to the roof and windows. Kane made no move to take the money. The town raised all this in one evening. People here care about their children's education, more than perhaps they've had opportunity to demonstrate before now. He studied her for a long moment. "You've accomplished in a week what the town council couldn't manage in years. Sometimes all people need is someone to believe something is possible." She met his gaze steadily. To see potential where others see only obstacles. Kane's jaw tightened, and she wondered if he understood she wasn't just talking about the school. Finally, he reached for the bag, weighing it in his palm before setting it aside without counting. "I'll have the deed transferred today. Building and land will belong to the town specifically for educational purposes." He pulled out a document, already prepared. "Jackson will bring men tomorrow to start repairs. No charge." Nora blinked in surprise. "That's very generous, Mr. Kane." He shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Can't have children in a leaking building. Bad for business." "Of course," she said, fighting a smile. "Purely practical considerations." Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, perhaps. "Precisely. Will you attend the school's opening? We're hoping to be ready within a month." Kane shook his head. "Not necessary." "Not necessary, perhaps, but you would be welcome." She hesitated, then added, "The children would like to thank their benefactor personally, I'm sure." He signed the deed with a flourish, pushing it across the desk to her. "You have a strange definition of benefactor, Miss Ellis. I sold you a building. At a reduced price, with free repairs thrown in." She took the deed, careful not to let their fingers touch. Some might call that generous. Some might be easily impressed. He stood, indicating their business was concluded. "Good luck with your school, Miss Ellis." Nora rose as well, tucking the deed safely into her bag. "Thank you, Mr. Kane, for everything." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Chance's wing is healing well. If you'd like to see him, I'm typically at my lodgings in the evenings." Kane's expression remained neutral, but something in his posture shifted. "I'll consider it." It wasn't quite an acceptance, but neither was it a refusal. Nora counted it as progress. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to Kane's word, Jackson and a team of miners arrived the day after their meeting to repair the church building. They worked efficiently, replacing broken windows, fixing the roof, and even reinforcing the floor in places where it had begun to rot. Nora spent her days preparing for classes, organizing curriculum, ordering books and supplies from catalogs, and visiting families to register students. Evenings were devoted to caring for Chance, whose wing was healing remarkably well. To her disappointment, Kane never came to check on the bird. She saw him occasionally in town, their interactions limited to brief nods of acknowledgement. He seemed to have retreated behind his walls again, the momentary connection they'd shared at the social apparently forgotten. The school preparations, however, progressed rapidly. The repaired building was painted white, with new desks crafted by the town carpenter and a proper blackboard installed at the front of the room. Books arrived from back east, along with slates, chalk, and maps. Word spread through the county, and by the time opening day approached, Nora had 28 students registered, far more than she had initially expected. The town buzzed with excitement, parents proudly preparing their children for their first day of formal education. 2 days before the school's opening, Nora was arranging books on the newly built shelves when she heard the door open behind her. "Just put those desks against the wall, Mr. Williams," she called without turning. I'll arrange them once I've finished here. Not Williams, came the familiar deep voice. Nora turned quickly to find Ryder Kane standing just inside the doorway, hat in hand. He looked uncomfortable, out of place in the bright, orderly classroom. "Mr. Kane," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "I wasn't expecting you." He glanced around the transformed space. "Place looks different." "Yes, thanks in large part to your men. They did exceptional work." Kane nodded, taking a few steps further into the room. "Jackson said you've been here from dawn till dusk every day. Dedication like that is uncommon. These children deserve nothing less." She set down the book she'd been holding. "What brings you here today, Mr. Kane?" He shifted his weight, fingers working the brim of his hat. "Came to see if you needed anything else before opening day." The offer caught her off guard. "That's very thoughtful. We're nearly ready, actually. Just arranging the last of the books and desks." "Good. That's good." He looked around again, seemingly at a loss for what to say next. Nora took pity on him. "How are things at the mine?" "Productive. New vein is yielding well." "I'm glad to hear it." An awkward silence fell between them. Nora busied herself straightening a row of books, acutely aware of his presence behind her. "How's the bird?" he finally asked. She smiled, turning back to him. "Chance is doing wonderfully. In fact, I was planning to release him tomorrow. The splint came off 3 days ago, and he's been testing his wings successfully." Something like pleasure flickered across Kane's face. "Good. That's good. Would you like to be there? When I release him, I mean." Kane looked genuinely startled by the invitation. "I don't think, please," Nora interrupted. "It would mean a lot to me. After all, you're the one who saved him." He studied her for a long moment, as if trying to decipher a particularly complex puzzle. "Where and when?" "The creek where we found him. Tomorrow at sunset?" It seemed fitting to return him to where we found him. Kane nodded slowly. "I'll be there." Before she could respond, he turned and strode out the door, leaving Nora staring after him with a mixture of confusion and anticipation. The following evening, Nora arrived at the creek early, carrying Chance in a small wicker cage. The bird was alert and active, fluttering from perch to perch within his temporary prison, a good sign that his wing had healed properly. The setting sun painted the desert landscape in shades of gold and crimson, the creek reflecting the fiery sky. Nora found a flat rock by the water's edge and sat down to wait, the cage beside her. Minutes stretched into a quarter hour, then half. Nora began to wonder if Kane had changed his mind. Perhaps he'd realized the symbolism was too heavy-handed, releasing a healed bird, giving it a second chance at life. Maybe he decided he preferred his reputation as Heartless Kane after all. Just as she was considering proceeding without him, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up, she saw Kane riding toward her, his black stallion moving at an unhurried pace. He dismounted fluidly, tying his horse to a nearby bush before approaching. "Miss Ellis." "Mr. Kane, I was beginning to think you wouldn't come. Got held up at the mine." He nodded toward the cage. "That our patient?" Nora smiled at his choice of words. "Our patient." "Yes. Chance is ready for his freedom." Kane knelt beside the cage, peering in at the sparrow. The bird hopped closer, seeming to recognize him. "Wing looks good. Thanks to your skill. Where did you learn such delicate work?" Kane's expression shuddered briefly. "My mother was skilled with healing. Plants, animals, people. She taught me some before she died." It was the most personal information he had ever shared with her. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. "Shall we release him?" Nora nodded, picking up the cage. "I thought right here would be appropriate where his journey with us began." They walked a few paces from the creek to a small clearing. Nora set the cage down and opened the door, then stepped back to stand beside Kane. For a moment, nothing happened. Chance remained inside, peering cautiously at the open door. "He's hesitating," Nora said softly. "After being cared for, perhaps freedom seems frightening." "Freedom always comes with risk," Kane replied, his eyes fixed on the bird. "But a cage, no matter how comfortable, is still a cage." As if hearing his words, Chance hopped to the cage door, paused for one final moment, then took flight. His wings beat strongly as he rose into the air, circled once above their heads, and then darted toward a nearby mesquite tree. Nora felt tears prick her eyes as she watched him go. "Beautiful," she whispered. When she glanced at Kane, she saw the same emotion reflected in his face, joy tinged with melancholy, pride mixed with loss. This time, he made no attempt to hide the moisture in his eyes. "Thank you for including me in this, Miss Ellis," he said quietly. "Nora," she corrected. "After all we've been through with Chance, I think you can call me Nora." He looked down at her, something shifting in his gray eyes. Ryder, then. The sound of his first name on her lips felt significant. Somehow a boundary crossed, a wall lowered. "Thank you, Ryder, for everything you did for Chance. And for the school. You're the one who deserves thanks. You saw possibility where others didn't, in an old building, in an injured bird." He paused, then added so softly she nearly missed it, "in me." Before she could respond, he turned away, looking out over the creek. The sun had nearly disappeared, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "It's getting late. I should see you safely back to town." Nora wanted to protest that their conversation wasn't finished, that something important was happening between them, but she nodded instead. "Thank you." They rode back to Redemption Springs in comfortable silence, the cooling night air carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. When they reached the edge of town, Ryder slowed his horse. "I'll leave you here," he said. "Wouldn't want to damage your reputation." "My reputation is not so fragile," Nora replied. "But thank you for your concern." He nodded, tipping his hat. "Good luck with your school opening. Will you come? The ceremony is at noon." Ryder shook his head. "Not my place." "It could be," Nora said softly, "if you wanted it to be." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. "Good night, Nora." "Good night, Ryder." She watched him ride away, his figure gradually disappearing into the night. Something had changed between them at the creek, something significant yet undefined. Whether he acknowledged it or not, Ryder Kane was no longer the heartless figure of town legend. At least not to her. The school's opening day dawned bright and clear, a perfect late summer morning. Nora arrived early, making final preparations before the students and their families arrived. Her heart was full of anticipation, not just for the beginning of classes, but for the chance to make a real difference in these children's lives. By 11:30, families began to gather outside the schoolhouse. Children in their best clothes, hair slicked down or braided neatly, fidgeted with excitement. Parents stood proudly, many of them never having had the opportunity for education themselves. Mayor Thompson arrived with the town council members, all dressed in their Sunday best for the occasion. Bernard brought a small cake decorated with Redemption Springs School, written in careful script. Even Sheriff Mills had polished his badge and boots for the event. At precisely noon, Mayor Thompson cleared his throat and addressed the gathered crowd. "Friends and neighbors, today marks a significant step forward for our community. With the opening of this school, we ensure a brighter future for our children and for Redemption Springs itself." He gestured to Nora. "We owe a debt of gratitude to Miss Ellis, whose determination and vision made this possible." Applause rippled through the crowd. Nora smiled, accepting the recognition with a modest nod. "We should also acknowledge Mr. Ryder Kane," Mayor Thompson continued, surprising Nora, who provided the building at a generous price and funded the necessary repairs. The applause was more hesitant this time, tinged with confusion. Most of the townspeople still viewed Kane with suspicion or fear. Nora scanned the crowd, knowing she wouldn't find him there, but hoping nonetheless. Her eyes settled instead on Jackson, Kane's foreman, standing at the back of the gathering with several minors. He caught her gaze and gave a small nod of acknowledgement. After the mayor's speech, Nora cut the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the schoolhouse door. Children filed in excitedly, finding their assigned desks while parents admired the bright, clean space. The day proceeded with introductions, distribution of books and slates, and a brief first lesson. By mid-afternoon, the formal ceremony had concluded, with families gradually dispersing to their homes and businesses. Nora remained in the classroom, arranging materials for the next day's proper lessons. A knock at the door interrupted her work. "Come in," she called, expecting perhaps a parent with a last-minute question. Jackson stepped inside, hat in hand. "Miss Ellis, fine ceremony today." "Thank you, Mr. Jackson. And thank you again for all your work on the building. You and your men did a remarkable job." He nodded, clearly uncomfortable with praise. Boss wanted me to deliver this. He extended a small package wrapped in brown paper. Said it's for the school. Nora took the package, surprised by its weight. Thank you. Is Mr. Kane not feeling well today? Jackson shrugged. Boss is boss. Keeps to himself. But he hesitated. He's been different lately. Less harsh with the men. Even smiled yesterday when one of the new miners told a joke. He shook his head as if the concept was difficult to comprehend. Never seen anything like it in 3 years working for him. People can change, Mr. Jackson. Sometimes they just need a reason to. Jackson nodded thoughtfully. Reckon so. Well, I'll leave you to your work, Miss Ellis. After he left, Nora carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a brass bell, a proper school bell with a wooden handle, polished to a high shine. Attached was a small card with a single line written in a strong, masculine hand. For calling your students to learn. RK. Nora ran her fingers over the smooth metal, a smile spreading across her face. Such a thoughtful gift, practical yet personal. She placed it carefully on her desk, already imagining ringing it the next morning to begin classes. That evening, as she walked back to her lodgings, Nora found herself taking a detour past Kane's office in town. A light burned inside, visible through the single window. Before she could reconsider, she climbed the steps and knocked on the door. Enter, came the familiar gruff response. She pushed open the door to find Ryder at his desk, ledgers spread before him just as they had been during their first meeting. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled his expression. Miss Ellis, something wrong with the bell? Not at all, she said, closing the door behind her. It's perfect. I came to thank you in person. He shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude. No need. Nevertheless, I appreciate it. And I missed seeing you at the ceremony today. Ryder's jaw tightened. I told you it wasn't my place. The mayor mentioned you specifically in his speech. The town knows what you contributed. He shrugged. Doesn't change anything, doesn't it? Nora moved closer to his desk. Mr. Jackson seems to think you've been different lately. Kinder to your workers. He even mentioned seeing you smile. Ryder's eyes narrowed. Jackson talks too much. Perhaps. Or perhaps he's simply noticed what I've been trying to tell you. You're not the heartless man everyone believes you to be. You don't know me, Nora, he said, his voice low. Not really. I know you helped an injured bird when no one was watching. I know you reduced the price of a building to help educate children who aren't yours. I know you sent men to repair that building at your own expense. She met his gaze steadily. I may not know everything about you, Ryder Kane, but I know enough. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to look out at the darkening street. What do you want from me? The question caught her off guard with its directness. I don't want anything from you. Everyone wants something. Nora considered her words carefully. I suppose what I want is for you to stop hiding. To allow yourself to be the man I glimpsed by the creek, the one with enough compassion to cry over a broken wing. Ryder turned, his expression a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. And if that man doesn't exist? If what you saw was just a momentary weakness? Then why did you give the school a bell? Why did you dance with me at the social? Why did you come to release Chance? He had no answer for her, his silence stretching between them. Nora took a deep breath, gathering her courage. The children would like to thank you properly for the schoolhouse. Would you consider visiting one day next week? Just for a few minutes. She expected an immediate refusal, but to her surprise, Ryder seemed to be genuinely considering it. What day? He finally asked. Wednesday? Around midday. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. I'll be there. Nora couldn't contain her smile. Thank you, Ryder. It will mean a great deal to them. And to me. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Nora. She looked back to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Be careful with your assumptions about me. I'm not a good man. I think you are, she replied softly. Whether you believe it yet or not. Wednesday arrived with bright sunshine and a cool breeze, perfect weather for the children's outdoor presentation. Nora had arranged for them to rehearse a short song of thanks, and several had written brief speeches expressing their gratitude for the schoolhouse. As noon approached, the children grew restless, constantly glancing toward the road. Nora found herself doing the same, wondering if Ryder would keep his promise or find a reason to stay away. Miss Ellis, called James, one of her older students. Is the mine man really coming? Mr. Kane, she corrected gently. And yes, I believe he will. Pa says he's meaner than a wounded cougar, piped up Sally, a freckle-faced 8-year-old. Your father is mistaken, Nora said firmly. Mr. Kane has been very generous to our school. That's why we're thanking him today. At precisely noon, a rider appeared on the road from town. Nora's heart lifted as she recognized Ryder on his black stallion, riding at a measured pace toward the school. The children fell silent as he approached, some edging closer to Nora, as if for protection. Ryder dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post near the schoolhouse steps. He'd made an effort with his appearance, his black coat brushed clean, his shirt crisp, his dark hair neatly combed beneath his hat. Children, Nora said, motioning him forward. This is Mr. Kane, who provided our wonderful schoolhouse. 28 pairs of eyes stared at him with a mixture of curiosity, awe, and trepidation. Ryder stood uncomfortably under their collective gaze, his hat in his hands. Thank you for coming, Mr. Kane, Nora said warmly. The children have prepared something special to show their appreciation. At her nod, the students arranged themselves in 2 neat rows and began to sing a simple melody about gratitude and learning that they had practiced diligently all week. Their young voices rose clear and sweet in the midday air. Nora watched Ryder's face as he listened. His expression remained carefully controlled, but she could see the muscle in his jaw working, the slight widening of his eyes. When the song concluded, 10-year-old Daniel stepped forward with a carefully folded piece of paper. Mr. Kane, sir, he began, his voice only slightly trembling. On behalf of all the students of Redemption Springs School, I want to express our sincere gratitude for providing this building where we can learn and grow. Many of us never had a proper school before, and now we can learn reading and writing and arithmetic and science and history. He took a breath, clearly reciting from memory. Education is a gift that can never be taken away, and we promise to use this gift wisely. Ryder stood very still, his knuckles white where he gripped his hat. You're welcome, he said, the words coming out rough and unpracticed. Emma, the youngest student at 6 years old, suddenly broke away from the group and approached him. In her hands, she held a crude drawing of the schoolhouse with stick figures standing outside it. I drew this for you, Mr. Kane, she said, holding it up. That's you. She pointed to a tall stick figure. And that's Miss Ellis. And that's all of us. We're saying thank you. Ryder knelt down to her level, taking the drawing with a gentleness that made Nora's heart constrict. Thank you, Emma, he said, his voice softer than Nora had ever heard it. Emma, apparently deciding that Ryder wasn't so frightening after all, impulsively threw her arms around his neck in a quick hug before darting back to the safety of the group. Ryder rose slowly, the drawing still in his hand, his expression stunned. Nora stepped forward to rescue him. Children, please return to your desks. We'll continue with our arithmetic lesson in 5 minutes. As the students filed inside, chattering excitedly, Nora turned to Ryder. Thank you for coming. It meant a great deal to them. He nodded, still looking somewhat shell-shocked. They're good kids. Yes, they are. She smiled. Would you like to see inside? How we've arranged everything. He hesitated, then nodded. Nora led him into the schoolhouse, watching as he took in the neatly arranged desks, the books on shelves, the maps on walls, and the bell prominently displayed on her desk. You've done well with it, he said finally. We all have. The town, the children, you. Ryder carefully folded Emma's drawing and tucked it into his coat pocket. I should go? Let you get back to your teaching. Of course. She walked him to the door. Thank you again for coming, Ryder. I know it wasn't easy for you. He paused at the threshold, looking down at her with an unreadable expression. Easier than I expected, he admitted quietly. Before she could respond, he was gone, mounting his horse and riding away with a nod of farewell. Nora watched him go, a sense of accomplishment warming her chest. Today was a beginning of what? She wasn't entirely sure, but a beginning nonetheless. The weeks that followed were busy ones for Nora, establishing routines with her students, adapting her curriculum to their varied needs and abilities, and settling into her role as Redemption Springs teacher occupied most of her waking hours. She saw little of Ryder during this time. Occasionally, she would spot him in town on business, and they would exchange nods or brief greetings, but nothing more. She tried not to feel disappointed, reminding herself that change comes slowly, especially to a man who had spent years building walls around himself. As autumn advanced, bringing cooler temperatures and golden light to the desert landscape, Nora received word that her permanent accommodations were finally ready. The town had converted rooms above the general store into a small apartment for the schoolteacher, a significant improvement over her room at the Traveler's Inn. On a Saturday morning in late October, she prepared to move her belongings. There wasn't much: a trunk of clothing, some books, personal mementos from home, but still more than she could carry in one trip. As she was contemplating how to transport everything, a knock came at her door. Opening it, she found Ryder standing in the hallway, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Ryder, this is a surprise. Bernard mentioned you were moving today. Thought you might need assistance." He didn't quite meet her eyes as he spoke. "That's very thoughtful. I was just wondering how to manage everything." He nodded, still looking at a point somewhere past her shoulder. "My wagon's outside." "Thank you. Please, come in. I just need to finish packing this last trunk." Ryder stepped inside, removing his hat. He looked out of place in the small, feminine room, his tall frame making the space seem even more cramped. "Won't take but a minute," Nora said, aware of his discomfort. She quickly folded the last of her clothing into the trunk and closed it. "There, all done." Ryder lifted the trunk effortlessly, tucking it under one arm, while picking up her valise with his free hand. "Anything else?" "Just those books and the small box on the dresser." He nodded. "I'll come back for them." Nora followed him downstairs and outside, where his wagon waited. It was a simple flatbed, clearly used for hauling supplies rather than passengers, but he had placed a blanket over the wooden boards to protect her belongings. "That was considerate," she said, nodding toward the blanket. Ryder shrugged, placing her trunk and valise in the wagon. "Practical. Roads are dusty." He returned upstairs for the remaining items, and within minutes, all of Nora's possessions were loaded. He offered his hand to help her onto the bench seat, the brief contact sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. The ride to her new lodgings was short but pleasant. The morning was crisp, the sky a brilliant blue overhead. Townspeople nodded or waved as they passed, their curious gazes following the unusual sight of Heartless Kane escorting the schoolteacher through town. "How is the school progressing?" Ryder asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Wonderfully. The children are eager to learn, though their abilities vary greatly. Some had a bit of schooling before, others are starting from the beginning. And you? Are you settling into Redemption Springs?" The question surprised her. "Yes, I believe I am. The town has been welcoming, and the work is fulfilling." He nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "Good." They arrived at the general store, where Mr. Williams was waiting to show Nora to her new apartment. His eyebrows rose at the sight of her companion, but, to his credit, he greeted Ryder politely. "Morning, Mr. Kane. Didn't expect to see you today." "Williams." Ryder nodded curtly, already moving to unload Nora's belongings. The apartment was small but charming: a sitting room with a cast-iron stove, a tiny kitchen area, a bedroom, and even a small bathroom with a proper tub. Large windows let in ample light, and someone had placed a vase of autumn wildflowers on the small dining table. "It's perfect," Nora said, turning to Mr. Williams. "Thank you. Glad you like it, Miss Ellis." Mrs. Williams thought you might appreciate the flowers. Said a new home should always have something pretty to welcome you. That was very kind of her. Ryder brought in the last of her belongings, setting the trunk carefully at the foot of the bed. "Where do you want these books?" "On that shelf, please," Nora directed, pointing to a bookcase in the sitting room. As he arranged the books, she noticed him pause, examining the titles. "Quite a collection," he remarked. "Thoreau, Emerson, Shakespeare, and dime novels." His eyebrow raised at the last discovery. Nora felt a blush rise to her cheeks. Everyone needs some light-hearted reading now and then. The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "I suppose they do." Mr. Williams, seeming to sense the charged atmosphere, cleared his throat. "Well, I'll leave you to settle in, Miss Ellis. Store's open until 6 if you need anything." After he left, a silence fell between Nora and Ryder. They stood in the small sitting room, suddenly awkward without a clear purpose to their interaction. "Thank you for your help today," Nora said finally. "It was very kind." Ryder shifted, uncomfortable with her gratitude, as always. "It was nothing. Not to me." She met his gaze directly. "Would you like some coffee?" I was planning to unpack my kitchen things next. He hesitated, clearly tempted but uncertain. I should get back to the mine. Of course. Another time, perhaps. Ryder nodded, reaching for his hat. Another time. At the door, he paused. The apartment suits you, he said, gesturing to the bright, orderly space. It's welcoming. Before she could respond, he was gone, his boots echoing on the wooden stairs. Nora stood at the window, watching as he climbed into his wagon and drove away, wondering at the strange, tender feeling blooming in her chest. As November brought cooler temperatures to Redemption Springs, the town began preparations for Thanksgiving. For many in the frontier community, it would be the first proper celebration of the holiday, and excitement ran high among Nora's students. "Miss Ellis, will we have a Thanksgiving pageant like they do back east?" asked Sally during their history lesson. "I think that's a wonderful idea," Nora replied, seeing an opportunity for both education and community building. "We could perform it for your parents and the town." The children cheered, immediately full of suggestions for costumes and roles. Nora guided them toward a simple retelling of the first Thanksgiving, with parts for everyone from the youngest to the oldest students. Over the next weeks, they rehearsed diligently, making paper costumes and simple props during art lessons. Parents contributed by sewing more elaborate pieces or helping build a small stage in the schoolyard. Word of the pageant spread through town, generating unexpected enthusiasm. Bernard offered the use of additional benches from the saloon for seating. Dr. Harrison's wife volunteered to play piano for the musical numbers. Even Sheriff Mills promised to ensure the event would be undisturbed by the usual Saturday night revelry. The day before the pageant, as Nora was helping the children with final rehearsals, she heard a wagon approaching. Looking up, she was surprised to see Ryder climbing down from the driver's seat. Behind him in the wagon bed stood a large, freshly cut pine tree. The children fell silent, still somewhat in awe of the mine owner despite his visit weeks earlier. Nora excused herself from the rehearsal and walked over to greet him. "Ryder, this is unexpected." He gestured to the tree. "Thought the pageant might need a backdrop." Jackson mentioned the children were performing outside. The thoughtfulness of the gesture took her breath away. "That's perfect, actually. We were going to use blankets hung from a line, but this will be much better." He nodded, apparently satisfied with her response. "Where do you want it?" With help from two of the older boys, Ryder positioned the tree behind the makeshift stage, securing it firmly in a wooden stand he'd brought for the purpose. The deep green branches provided an ideal natural backdrop for the performance. "Thank you," Nora said when they'd finished. "This adds so much to our humble production." Ryder brushed pine needles from his coat. "Least I could do. The children have worked hard, from what I hear." "They have. Will you come tomorrow? The pageant begins at 3. He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be there." True to his word, Ryder arrived the next day just as the audience was gathering in the schoolyard. He stood at the back, taller than most of the attendees, his presence noted but no longer causing the stir it once would have. The pageant was a charming success. Children recited their lines with varying degrees of confidence. Songs were sung mostly in tune, and only one costume malfunction occurred when little Tommy's turkey feathers came unstuck mid-performance. Afterward, a community feast was held in the town hall, tables groaning under the weight of contributed dishes. Nora found herself seated between Dr. Harrison and Mayor Thompson, engaged in pleasant conversation about the school's progress and plans for the coming year. As the meal concluded, she glanced around, realizing she hadn't seen Ryder since the pageant ended. Excusing herself, she slipped outside, scanning the darkening street for his tall figure. She found him near the schoolhouse, sitting alone on a bench beneath the bare branches of an old cottonwood tree. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his features. "You left the celebration," she said, sitting beside him. "Not much for crowds. The children performed well, I thought." He nodded. "They did. You've taught them well in a short time." "Thank you." She studied his profile in the fading light. "Why did you really bring the tree yesterday, Ryder?" He was silent for a moment, his jaw working as if chewing over his words. "When I was a boy," he finally said, "my mother always made Christmas and Thanksgiving special, despite having little money. She said celebrations matter, they mark the passing of time, remind us to be grateful." He shrugged. thought the children deserved that same feeling. It was the most he had ever shared about his past, and Nora treasured the confidence. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. His voice was soft with memory. Died when I was 12. Fever took her in 3 days. I'm sorry, Nora said simply. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. What about your family? Ryder finally asked. They must miss you, especially during the holidays. Nora sighed. My parents passed several years ago, my father from heart failure, my mother from pneumonia the following winter. I have a brother in San Francisco, but we're not close. He disapproved of my coming west to teach. Why? He thought it unseemly for a woman of my background to work at all, let alone in a frontier town. He wanted me to marry his business partner, a man twice my age who saw me as little more than an ornament. Ryder's jaw tightened. Your brother sounds like a fool. Nora laughed softly. Perhaps, but his disapproval gave me the final push I needed to follow my own path. For that, at least, I'm grateful. And are you happy with the path you chose? The directness of the question caught her off guard. Yes, she said after a moment's reflection. I find purpose in teaching, and redemption springs. She glanced at him. It's become home in ways I never expected. Something shifted in Ryder's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his perpetual guard. I'm glad. From the town hall came the sounds of music, starting up a fiddle and guitar, playing a lively tune. Nora smiled at the familiar melody. They're dancing, she said. Would you like to return to the celebration? Ryder shook his head. I prefer it here. But don't let me keep you from the festivities. I prefer it here as well, Nora said simply. His eyes met hers, surprise and something warmer mingling in their gray depths. Do you? Yes. They sat together as full darkness fell, talking softly of small things, the progress of the school, the changing season, books they had read. It was the longest conversation they had ever shared, and Nora found herself increasingly drawn to the intelligent, thoughtful man emerging from behind the cold facade of Heartless Kane. When the night grew too cold to remain outdoors comfortably, Ryder walked her back to her apartment above the general store. At her door, he hesitated. Thank you for the conversation, Nora. It was pleasant. She smiled at his formal phrasing. It was. Perhaps we could do it again sometime. He nodded, a tentative smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I'd like that. As December brought the first dusting of snow to the high desert, Nora found herself spending more time in Ryder's company. Their meetings were often brief, a shared cup of coffee when he came to town for supplies, a conversation on the schoolhouse steps after classes ended, but each one revealed more of the man behind the reputation. She learned that he read voraciously, favoring history and philosophy, that he had fought for the Union in the war, returning with both physical and invisible scars, that he had a dry, understated wit that emerged when he was relaxed, that his hands, so large and calloused from physical labor, could still handle delicate objects with remarkable gentleness. The town noticed their growing friendship, of course. Whispers followed Nora in the general store and at church services. Some were concerned, others merely curious, but all marveled at the change in Ryder Kane. Men actually said good morning to me yesterday, Bernard told her one afternoon when she stopped for tea. Nearly fell over from shock. Perhaps he simply found reasons to engage more with the community, Nora suggested mildly. Bernard's knowing look said he understood perfectly well what, or rather who that reason might be. As Christmas approached, the school prepared for another celebration, a small program of carols and recitations, followed by simple gifts for the children funded by the town council. Nora extended an invitation to Ryder personally one evening as they walked from the schoolhouse to her apartment. It won't be as elaborate as the Thanksgiving pageant, she explained, but the children are excited nonetheless. I'll be there, he promised. The day of the Christmas program brought unexpected heavy snow, unusual for the region, but creating a perfectly festive atmosphere. Parents and townspeople crowded into the schoolhouse, stamping snow from their boots and exclaiming over the decorations the children had made. Ryder arrived just as the program was beginning, slipping quietly into a seat at the back. Nora, busy organizing her students, caught his eye and smiled warmly. He nodded in return, removing his hat and brushing snow from his shoulders. The children performed admirably, their young voices filling the schoolhouse with joyful songs. Afterward, simple gifts were distributed: handmade wooden toys for the boys, cloth dolls for the girls, and books for all, purchased with council funds. As the celebration wound down and families began to depart, Ryder approached Nora at her desk. "Successful event," he said, his voice low amidst the remaining chatter. "Thank you. The children worked very hard." She hesitated, then added, "I have something for you, actually. A small Christmas gift." Surprise flickered across his face. "You didn't need to do that. I wanted to." She reached into her desk drawer and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. "It's nothing extravagant." Ryder took the package with uncharacteristic uncertainty. "I don't have anything for you." "That doesn't matter. Go ahead, open it." He carefully untied the ribbon and unwrapped the paper to reveal a leather-bound journal. The cover was simple but elegant, the paper inside of good quality. "I noticed you making notes in that tattered ledger book," Nora explained. "Thought you might appreciate something more substantial." Ryder ran his fingers over the smooth leather, seemingly at a loss for words. "Thank you," he finally managed. "It's perfect. You're welcome." "Merry Christmas, Ryder." "Merry Christmas, Nora." He hesitated, then added, "Would you? That is, if you're not otherwise engaged. Would you have dinner with me tomorrow evening? At my home?" The invitation caught her completely off guard. In all their interactions, he had never suggested she visit his private residence. "I would be delighted," she said, once she recovered her composure. "I'll come for you at 5. He nodded, tucking the journal carefully into his coat. "Until tomorrow, then." As he left, Nora found herself watching his retreating figure with a mixture of anticipation and something deeper, something she wasn't quite ready to name. The following evening, Nora dressed with particular care, choosing a deep blue dress she'd been saving for a special occasion and arranging her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual simple bun. The effect, she hoped, was elegant but not overstated. At precisely 5 o'clock, a knock came at her door. Ryder stood outside, wearing a clean black suit she had never seen before, his dark hair neatly combed. In his hand, he held a small bunch of winter berries tied with a ribbon. "These are for you," he said, extending the makeshift bouquet. "Not much blooms this time of year." "They're lovely," Nora replied, genuinely touched by the gesture. "Thank you. Please, come in while I put them in water." As she arranged the berries in a small vase, she was acutely aware of Ryder's presence in her small sitting room. He seemed to take up more space than should be possible, his tall frame making the room feel suddenly intimate. "Ready?" he asked when she'd finished. The ride to Ryder's home took them away from town, following a winding trail into the foothills. As they traveled, the landscape opened up around them, vast stretches of desert dotted with saguaro and mesquite, backed by the purple shadows of distant mountains. The recent snow lingered in patches, creating a striking contrast against the red earth. "It's beautiful out here," Nora said, drawing her cloak tighter against the evening chill. "Peaceful," Ryder agreed. "That's why I chose it." They crested a small rise, and his home came into view, a substantial log cabin nestled against a rocky outcropping. It was larger than she had expected, with a wide covered porch and several outbuildings nearby. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth within. "This is lovely," Nora said as he helped her down from the wagon. "Did you build it yourself?" "Most of it. Had help with the roof and chimney." Ryder led her up the porch steps, opening the door with an unexpected touch of nervousness. "It's not fancy, but it's comfortable." The interior was a surprise. Where Nora had expected stark bachelor quarters, she found instead a space that was undeniably masculine, but also welcoming. The main room held a large stone fireplace with a fire already blazing, comfortable-looking furniture arranged on a colorful woven rug, and bookshelves filled to capacity along one wall. A doorway led to what appeared to be a kitchen, where savory smells indicated dinner preparations were underway. "Please, make yourself comfortable," Ryder said, taking her cloak. "Would you like wine?" "I have a decent red from California." "That would be lovely, thank you." As he moved to pour the wine, Nora explored the room, drawn inevitably to the bookshelves. They held an impressive collection: classics, history, science, and to her surprise, poetry. Many showed signs of frequent reading, cracked spines, dog-eared pages. "You have quite a library," she remarked when he returned with 2 glasses. "Books are good company," he said simply, handing her a glass, "especially on long winter nights." They sat near the fire, the crackling flames creating a cozy atmosphere as darkness fell outside. Conversation flowed more easily than Nora had anticipated, moving from books to childhood memories, from the school's progress to Ryder's plans for expanding the mine. When dinner was ready, he led her to a small dining area where a table had been set with obvious care, proper china, polished silverware, even candles and simple holders. "This is beautiful, Ryder. You went to a lot of trouble. Wanted it to be special." He cleared his throat, seemingly embarrassed by the admission. "It's been a long time since I entertained anyone." The meal was surprisingly well prepared: a tender roast, vegetables, freshly baked bread. When Nora complimented the food, Ryder admitted with some reluctance that he enjoyed cooking. "My mother taught me," he explained. "Said a man should know how to feed himself properly, not just survive on beans and bacon like most bachelors. She was a wise woman. She would have liked you," he said quietly, then looked surprised, as if the words had escaped without his permission. After dinner, they returned to the fire with coffee. Nora found herself increasingly aware of Ryder's proximity, the way the firelight caught the silver at his temples, the unexpected grace of his large hands as he stoked the fire. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," she said. "I've enjoyed seeing where you live. It suits you, strong, straightforward, but with unexpected comforts." Ryder looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his gray eyes. "You see things in me that others don't, Nora." "Because I look more closely." "Why?" The question was simple but heavy with meaning. Nora considered her answer carefully. "Because from the moment I saw you tend that injured bird, I suspected there was more to Ryder Kane than the town's stories suggested. And I've always been curious about the truth behind stories." He moved slightly closer on the sofa they shared. "And what truth have you found?" "That you're a complex man with a capacity for both strength and gentleness. That you value education and beauty despite your rough exterior. That you've been hurt deeply enough to build walls, but not so deeply that kindness can't still reach you." Ryder's expression softened in a way she had never seen before. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he reached for her hand. His fingers were warm and calloused as they enclosed hers. "Nora," he said, her name almost a caress on his lips. "I'm not good at expressing certain things." "You're doing fine," she assured him, turning her hand to interlace their fingers. He looked down at their joined hands, then back to her face. "Since you came to town, everything's changed." "I've changed, and I'm not sure I understand it entirely, but I know that when I'm with you, I feel more alive, more myself." He took a deep breath. "I care for you deeply." The simple declaration, clearly difficult for him to make, touched Nora more than the most eloquent poetry could have. "I care for you too, Ryder." His eyes searched hers, as if seeking confirmation of what he'd heard. Then, with exquisite slowness, he leaned forward until their faces were inches apart. "May I?" he whispered. In answer, Nora closed the distance between them, pressing her lips gently to his. The kiss was tender, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they parted, Ryder's expression was one of wonder, as if he'd discovered something precious and unexpected. Outside, snow began to fall again, large flakes drifting past the windows. Inside, beside the crackling fire, 2 people who had each in their own way been alone for too long found comfort in a second chance at connection. The new year brought changes to Redemption Springs. The school flourished under Nora's guidance, with enrollment growing as word spread to outlying farms and ranches. The mine continued to produce well, providing employment and stability to the region. And most remarkably to the townspeople, Ryder Kane gradually emerged from his self-imposed isolation. It began with small gestures, attending town council meetings, contributing to community projects, greeting people by name in the street. When spring arrived, he donated lumber and labor for a playground behind the schoolhouse. By summer, his presence at town gatherings no longer caused a stir, and the nickname Heartless Kane faded from use. Through it all, his relationship with Nora deepened. They were discreet but not secretive, their growing attachment evident to anyone who cared to observe. They rode together on Sundays, shared meals several times a week, and were often seen deep in conversation on the schoolhouse steps after classes ended. Some in town expressed concern the rough mine owner and the refined schoolteacher seemed an unlikely match. But those who knew them best recognized the genuine connection between them. As Bernard put it to a gossiping patron, two people finding happiness in this harsh land is a blessing, not something to criticize. On a warm evening in late August, nearly a year since Nora had first arrived in Redemption Springs, Ryder took her riding to the creek where they had mended Chance's wing. The spot had become special to them, both a place of beginnings. They dismounted near the water, spreading a blanket in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Ryder seemed unusually quiet, almost nervous, as they settled on the blanket. "Is something wrong?" Nora finally asked, concerned by his uncharacteristic restlessness. "No," he said quickly. "Nothing wrong. Just—" He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about something. About us." Nora's heart quickened. "Oh, this past year has been. I never expected to find happiness again after the war. Thought that part of my life was over." He looked down at their intertwined hands. "Then you arrived, with your determination to start a school and your refusal to be intimidated by my reputation. You didn't make it easy," Nora teased gently. A smile touched his lips. "No, I didn't. But you persisted. Saw something in me I thought was long dead." He met her gaze directly. "You brought me back to life, Nora." The simple declaration, spoken in his deep, earnest voice, brought tears to her eyes. "Ryder, let me finish," he said softly. "Please." She nodded, squeezing his hand in encouragement. "I love you, Nora Ellis. With everything I am, everything I have. And if you'll have me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I'd be honored to spend the rest of my life with you." Opening the box, he revealed a beautiful ring of sapphire surrounded by small diamonds, set in gold. "Ryder," Nora whispered, tears now flowing freely. "It's beautiful. Is that a yes?" He asked, a hint of his old gruffness returning through his vulnerability. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Absolutely yes." His smile, full and unguarded, transformed his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, pouring all his love and promise into the embrace. When they finally parted, Nora rested her forehead against his. Who would have thought that an injured bird would lead to this? Perhaps it wasn't chance after all, Ryder mused. Perhaps it was destiny. "Destiny," Nora repeated, liking the sound of it. "I think our little sparrow would approve." As if in answer, a bird called from a nearby branch, not a sparrow but a meadow lark, its clear, sweet song filling the air with joyful affirmation. They were married in October, when the desert bloomed with late wildflowers, and the air held the perfect balance between summer's heat and winter's chill. The entire town attended, the church overflowing with well-wishers. Children from the school sang. Bernard served his finest spirits at the reception, and even Sheriff Mills was seen to wipe away a tear during the ceremony. Nora wore a gown of ivory satin sent from San Francisco by her brother, who had finally reconciled with her choice of life. Ryder, resplendent in a new black suit, stood tall and proud beside her as they exchanged vows. "I never thought I'd see the day," Dr. Harrison remarked to his wife during the reception. Heartless Kane, looking like the happiest man in the territory. "Not heartless anymore," his wife corrected gently. "Just Kane. Or better yet, Ryder." Indeed, as the couple danced their first dance as husband and wife, no trace remained of the cold, isolated man who had once been the subject of fearful whispers. In his place stood a man transformed by love, still strong, still serious, but with warmth in his eyes and tenderness in his touch. Later that evening, as they prepared to depart for a brief honeymoon in Tucson, Ryder drew Nora aside to a quiet corner of the town hall. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small wooden box from his pocket. Nora opened it to find a delicate silver pendant in the shape of a sparrow in flight. "Oh, Ryder," she breathed. "It's perfect. Had it made in Tucson," he explained, helping her fasten it around her neck. "To remind us both of beginnings." She touched the pendant gently, then looked up at her husband with love shining in her eyes. "Not just beginnings, my love. Second chances." Ryder smiled, drawing her close. "Second chances," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. and a lifetime of them ahead. As they rode out of town that evening, the setting sun gilded the desert landscape in gold and crimson. Behind them lay Redemption Springs, the town where a determined schoolteacher had seen beyond a man's fearsome reputation to the heart hiding beneath. Ahead lay their future together, a future built on understanding, compassion, and the healing power of love. High above, a sparrow soared on mended wings, free and strong in the vast desert sky.